both formed by this whole research area of the power of experiences in shaping people. So let's get this wild conversation going. Welcome to the Wild Conversation, where human being and human doing converge, reshaping the world of leadership, culture, and performance. Sabbath, will you introduce our guest today?
Absolutely. I am honored to be having a wild conversation with Dr. Paul Yost today. He's the chair and associate professor of industrial organizational psychology at Seattle Pacific University. And he was recently senior research specialist and a people organization capability at Microsoft. Prior to that, he was in leadership development and people research at the Boeing Company, where he co-led company-wide longitudinal study of leaders in aerospace called the Waypoint Project. And he's a longtime friend and colleague of Dr. McKenna. Dr. Yost, thank you for being with us today.
Great to be here.
We're going to play a quick round of wild cards. Answer from our gut. We're not going to overthink it and give our first response. So I'll pick the first one. I'm going to pick a number between 1 and 10, and I'll pull one out, read it, answer it. And then Paul, we'll have you go next. And then Rob, you'll close this out for this game. Okay. So I am going to pick, my daughter's turning 9. So I'm going to pick card 9. So my question is, are you more focused on urgency or patience today? I'm going to say, honestly, I am focused on urgency. I feel like there's multiple things that I am feeling the need to complete in a certain time frame. And so I'm focused on urgency today. Okay, we have 9 cards left in the deck. Dr. Yost, pick a number.
Number 3.
Number 3. What experience do you want next, and who can open up that door for you?
I would like to publish an article on philosophy and ethic, and I'm thinking of writing it with Scott Campanario.
That's awesome. I never thought of an experience as writing an article. That's pretty, I like that. I have all kinds of questions. Okay.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Okay, there are 8 cards left.
8, of course.
8.
That's the number.
Okay.
Always has been since I was 8 years old.
Okay. Are you open to editing yourself for the sake of others, even if it might hurt a little?
Yes, I think I am. But I think the big developmental question for me right now in this season is whether that's the main job. Is editing or voicing and deepening convictions I have. So that's my tension. All right. Thank you, Sabbath, for kicking us off. So Paul. So those of you don't know Paul, Paul and I have been colleagues for a long time. I don't even know how to describe us. We're friends, we're colleagues. He's been my boss, I've been his boss. We still remained friends for some reason. We were across the hall from each other for years and years and years. And if you don't know how faculty function, like in a department, one of the huge blessings is that when your officers are across the hall from each other, you're just one step away from great thinking. And so Paul and I had probably some of our most powerful conversations just in the hall between our offices, because they were literally across the hall from each other for years. And Paul has played a very important role in my life developmentally. I have tremendous respect for him, not only as it's strange when you meet somebody who's this integration of practitioner and scholar and scientist. And I say practitioner, I mean someone who knows how to get it done and puts himself in the mind of leaders and people in just normal everyday workplaces. We were both formed by this whole research area of the power of experiences in shaping people. You have a mind that integrates research practice and the study of individuals in the context of larger organizational systems. And I'm really curious, Paul, and you just mentioned this just a moment ago, like some of the things you want to do. And so what are you studying right now?
What makes work meaningful? And we just ran some research on that. And so if I'm a manager and I want to create, it can be transactional, right? It can be work is not my identity. I show up, I get paid, and then I can spend my weekend and support my family. But what if I wanted work to be meaningful? And I think that goes beyond engagement. I think, yeah, this job matters to me. So we just ran some analyses on that, and we get really interesting things popping up, like the extent to which it meets your personal needs is important. It accounts for 25% of the variance in meaningful. But the extent to which you can make a difference in the world accounts for significant variance above and beyond your personal needs. So what's my role in this larger picture where I can make other people better?
And so a couple of pieces of context for this conversation, because I was thinking about what I didn't say, is that Paul and I are founders of this PhD program, master's program. So we were working with doctoral students. So a lot of our job is running research teams and like, what is this next layer of research? And so that's what he's describing some of this work. It's to give you a little bit of context. When he describes, so that you said personal meaningfulness is predicting about 25%.
Yeah. So to what extent I care about competence, I care about autonomy,
What I care about,
about money.
And what was the dependent variable, meaning the outcome variable?
To what extent do I experience my job
As meaningful? Okay.
Yeah. And it also that in turn predicts lower turnover. It in turn predicts engagement, the extent to which
job meaningfulness, right?
Job.
Yeah. So it's like that's an outcome, but then that predicts other things.
Are you going to stay in your job?
Yeah. So we changed the names of one of the assessments in the platform called the Meaningful Goals Assessment, but it's having people just think intentionally about across different areas of their life, their own development, their job, their family, what gives you purpose and meaning in that area, and then set goals that are aligned with that. So it's like if you had a pie, and then that's 25% of that's being predicted by those personal things. And so when he says over and above, whenever you do a study, that there's other variables that might be contributing to that 25%.
Even more of the pie.
Yeah. And so it's like, so even just whatever they cross over, then what he said just now was that other piece, which is where I have the question, is predicting even more on top of that first 25%, where the crossover is. And so there's more to explain. So if you are one of those people who's either, you're leading a team, large, small organization, nonprofit, like they need those personal pieces, right, to feel that sense of meaningfulness in the job. And then you said this other thing is, what are some of the practices? Like, how do I open that up for a person?
So we actually looked at 4 variables. So I'll start with my practice brain.
Okay.
And then I'll tell you the interesting research question we're asking. So my practice brain said we're actually looking at 4 different predictors of meaningfulness. The first is the extent to which it meets these personal needs that you have. Me. The second we looked at is the extent to which I can do that for you, right? So if I'm trying to motivate the people in my group, some of them I'm just going to be like, here's what's in it for you. You want to advance from an apprentice to expert in this. We're going to give you these tasks, and you're gonna get a lot better.
Yeah.
Another person at a personal level, you want a boat? Great, you can work 20 extra hours per week. I'm going to need you to perform like crazy, but you know what? You can get a boat, right? So some people you're going to motivate with the personal. The second group that we looked at is the extent to which you help others with those. And that's your small group. So some people love to be a supervisor, say, I'm going to make you competent. I'm going to make you autonomous. I'm going to build relationships. I'm going to help you build relationships with others. So it's not about my needs, but it's about my friends.
Yeah.
Or colleagues, right? So that's another trigger you can use is, okay, it's not about me, but I can do that for these people around me. The third is, how does your job help a larger system, larger society, right? Which we talked about. What's the purpose of it?
Yeah.
In like, for example, the stuff that's emerging on artificial intelligence says in 10 years, the people who are going to have job security are the trades, the electricians, the plumbers, the welders, the cement.
We work with a lot of trades businesses, so I feel it. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the things you're not going to replace.
Yeah.
I talked with somebody who just talked with the head of security at Microsoft. And he said, in 5 years, we're going to need half or a third of the people we have. So IT jobs might be going away, and so how can you develop? So those jobs play such an important role.
I've talked to a lot of leaders about this, that what that line of work was just highlighting is the possibility, and there's some interesting research, right? That what will get me from a -5 in terms of how I feel about my job to a 0 is different than the things that will get me from a 0 to a +5. And so things like money matters, but it's never going to get you to
extra.
It's the extra where it's like, this is meaningful. And I never really associated that with meaningfulness. You talked about like my effect on like not culture, but what did you say, on
society? Or it could be customers.
Or could it even be just customers?
Yeah,
could it
absolutely.
be just like something more immediate where it's like, I want to make a difference in my business.
Right.
You can feel it already because you want to do something beyond yourself.
Right.
So I've got a bunch of Paul's books with me, and these are 2 books. Like one of Paul's books is Real-Time Leadership Development that he published with another dear friend of ours, and this is an outstanding book. And I was able to work on that project with Paul. Also, there's The Age of Agility, which I love this book, and I have there's chapter in here as well with Emily. It's kind of awesome, and I was rereading some of this stuff, especially in the book on agility. And let me find the quote, because I found how I'm reading through them, like, what in this is something I want to ask Paul about, because we've had all kinds of conversations around learning agility and experience-driven leader development and all that. And you say this, and again, you say this with Cindy McCauley. So it's like, you guys are co-authoring this, and you say this: on the other hand, staffing for development, I need to read this in context. It says, staffing for performance aims to maximize person job fit, which is such an emphasis in our field. Is this because it's a powerful thing, right? That connection between the person and the fit for the job that they're assigned to do.
If you can get people 100% connected to perform on the job on day one, that's the whole.
So imagine, like, and again, we'll go back to a plumber. Like, you've got a person who's seamlessly connects into the role.
Yes.
And that fit is there, and it's like they are chirping away, right? Now, but this chapter, a lot of it was about like this of stepping to the edge of our comfort zone. So it's about taking risks, like, and doing things that are not so comfortable, where that fit isn't there. Listen to this quote. I hadn't read your chapter before. I'm sure you read mine many times. So it says so many times. It says, on the other hand, staffing for development requires some amount of person job misfit to create a stretch experience. It's just it is so counter to all the powerful research on the power of person job fit. You're saying some amount of person job misfit is a good thing. So our friend Kathy Tout, she runs a plumbing business.
Yeah.
She's CEO of a plumbing business.
Yeah.
Her husband passed away. She never planned on being the CEO of that plumbing business, and she's the CEO of a plumbing business. And she's trying to develop leader capacity, plumber capacity, their business value statement, all of it. What would you tell Kathy about some amount of person job misfit to create stretch experience? You have to have some amount of that.
So here would be my question to you. Have you ever been in a job that you could perform immediately? Okay, I'll give you one. I know one of your stories.
All right.
You've been teaching organizational behavior for 7 years. Yeah. Intro to organizational behavior.
Yeah.
You come into the class. This is way back in the day. You have your stack of PowerPoints for the overhead projector. As I remember the story, you looked at him and said, I can't do this. And I don't know if you remember this story, but I remember how it ended because it's changed the way I've taught.
How did it end, Paul? You're taking me back.
You said you showed up, you were just dead. It was a perfect job fit, right? Perfect job fit. You took all the slides, you set them on the table beside you and said, why do you think I had you read the chapters I did today?
That's right. Now it's coming back.
And you just had a conversation.
Oh,
You didn't know where that conversation was going to go. So your friend Kathy, I'd say you get a senior high-level plumber. Maybe you bring him in to say, where's plumbing going and what do we need? And Kathy says, where's plumbing going? What do we need to think about in the future? I mean, it might be an hour or two a week. She sits down, has coffee with.
yeah.
And suddenly I'm thinking about things that I'm not 100%.
You know, and I think this is the way that I say it, and I think you would agree with this. I think one of the building blocks of that, sort of the fundamentals, is that tension that someone feels when they're in a stretch is sometimes not very fun to either manage or to have them experience. So it's like when we work with doctoral students and we're pushing them in places where they literally don't really want to go, nor are they interested in going. But we know we've been at it long enough that 10 years from now they're going to thank us. But that doesn't make it any easier in the moment where they're like, I don't get why you're
No.
why this particular stretch
In the
is
next
occurring.
year or two, they might not thank us.
Right. Sometimes it's been 5 to 7. I mean, that's a pretty common story. You know, like and not all of them. I apologize to other ones for that moment if you were in my class that day, because it's like, and it's interesting. So what I would say to a leader out there is say, what Paul is describing is that there is some level of dissonance, like that we just like that rub that's necessary for growth. And I see that all over your chapter. It's like, it doesn't mean you got to have some fit, but that some level of rub and stretch that sometimes we're not even sure we want is going to be necessary for growth.
Yeah, my measure. So I have two measures. Like how do you decide that tension?
Yeah.
Right. Because we talk about, oh, there's a tension, this, and everyone always feels like they're in the middle. Right. But that doesn't help you understand what the middle is. So I have two measures for it.
Yeah.
If I'm managing someone else, they have all the skills to do the minimum, but there's this growth potential. So that's one. If it's me,
yeah,
I know I'm in the sweet spot if I'm excited and scared at the same time.
It's the Jackie quote. She would say that. My wife.
Well, yeah. She's a pretty smart person.
She is. She's like, if I'm excited and scared, then it's probably an important thing.
Probably an okay thing.
Thank you. Okay, I want to talk about trust for a minute. And we've talked a little bit about this because I'm curious on your thoughts. You know, I've been all about whole leader development. A lot of that was formative for me I've talked to people about the Waypoint experience for me and seeing the complexity and the variables that were going on in a person's life. And it's a complex story. And realizing a lot of the work we were doing was also with more depth, but kind of mapping to a typical organizational behavior textbook, like basically taking the fundamentals of the psychology of a person. That the psychology of a person sounds kind of cold and mechanistic, but in fact, it's a human story. So there's spirit in it, right? There's a soul in it. It's more than just a psychological story. And so then I spend all my time like with this emphasis on developing whole leader and team capacity, and whole meaning to take all those variables we know are at play, motivation, and purpose and calling, and social support, and all these things that are important pieces, and put them together in an attempt to develop leaders. And you and I have been involved in all that kind of work. So I'm spending so much time, years and years, like on this power of this. And in the early days, I thought this is so ridiculous that people wouldn't pay attention to this. It's like stupid not to use, right? As we would say, like, it's like, I saw it changing in my own life. And then I started to realize years ago that it was the conversation. And then in more recent years, when we started pushing these conversations into teams in an intentional rhythm and system of conversations where there's room for the person, but there's still a structure to have the conversation. As we started to work with teams on that what was actually changing, that was very fundamental, that it took me a long time to buy into, and you know why, was trust. We found that this was changing, and then to redo. So I took all that work, and this is the definition that I tell people about what trust is based on a lot of different pieces. And that trust is your belief in my integrity, my ability, my reliability, my strength, and that I'm telling you the truth when any of those things are lacking. So in other words, trust is your belief, something I can't prove is there. It's a belief. It's in your mind that I will do what you're asking me to do. I'm able to do it, that I'll do it consistently, and that I'll do it well. And that if any of those pieces aren't there, I'll tell you the truth.
Mhm.
As opposed to kind of pretending that those pieces are, we see this all the time, like in executives down to first level managers.
Right.
And then one of the things that emerged was this realization that it's really difficult to trust a person if you don't know a person. And how a world, because you got to know a lot about a person.
Right.
And how can you know a person if they don't know something about themselves? And so it's, you know what I mean? Whereas I
Right.
discover all these pieces of the puzzle, I'm able to share, because Paul and I, we have fought like over the years. Like, this is not a relationship. This is one of the reasons he's my dearest friends, is because we've been through it. We've been mad at each other, we've argued with each other, and we have maintained that because there's an honesty. And so I don't know, the questions I have, Paul, that kind of is
So
like,
by the way, I did a literature search.
okay, of course you did.
To see what do academics say trust is.
Yeah.
Just to see if you
That's where I went to
see if you were correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it turns out people who sit around in offices and ivory towers are actually have identified a couple of the things that you have there as well. So this predictability, reliability, integrity, who you are, what I see is right. They had a couple others that can I ask you? So one is competence, which I guess is your strengths.
It is, yeah.
And
or ability is what I would say.
Okay, yeah.
The strength is
that's exactly
do it well.
That I bet it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
They have another dimension in there, which is caring, which I think is implicit in your definition. But like, do I have your best interests in mind? Is that implicit?
It's really interesting. I think the concept of like that I'm telling you the truth, if those things are lacking or if they're not.
You're doing that because
I don't know if it's possible to do that well without some level of caring. Like what we say at WiLD Leaders is we're like, let me tell you the kind of organization where this isn't going to work with the leader, where it's not going to work, is where you have no understanding whatsoever that this is not all about you. Like it just won't.
Right.
Like, how do you work with that? You know what I mean? And so, but most people will accept the invitation that there's at least a sliver,
right,
of reality that Paul matters as much as, or maybe more than I do. But so that's very interesting.
I think it's implicit in what you have. Otherwise, you end up with a person who starts a sentence with, "What you probably don't realize about yourself is,"
right,
and it's about them. It's not about you.
It is so interesting, Paul, because one of the things that with trust.
What if you don't trust the other person?
Yeah.
How do I interact with them? And that's part of that faithfulness.
Yeah. And it's interesting.
Am I showing up looking for their strengths, their abilities,
Yeah. And I've described lately when I talk about faith is my this is the way I define it, is my belief in something I can't prove. So faith is that. So for example, a trust fall. A lot of us have done that. Sure. Fall back. I can have faith that you will catch me. But I talk about trust as being faith with teeth. Because if I trust you, I actually will fall. So it connects what I'm believing, the invisible thing, to the act. And it's one of the reasons that we describe to organizations we work with is that every business, and this takes me back to like the Ohio State studies, where it's like this, we've known for almost a century that the two fundamentals in organizations are like, whether it's task and consideration, it's like operations is a reality. It affects trust. Like it's hard to trust. It's hard to do all this if I don't have a clear job description. You know what I mean? And that there's human beings. And one thing I find interesting with trust is I describe it as the bridge between those two things, because it's the actual act. Like I will fall, you know what I mean? And faith says I believe it, but trust says.
One of those things about trust that some people have written is it's making yourself vulnerable to the other person.
Huge part of it.
Which, like, that goes beyond faith, right? It's that you are in the act.
Yeah. And one of the things I think is cool, I described this recently, that about business, while sometimes there's this challenge, and sometimes we treat people like robots and machines, we have all, because as we scale, we kind of sometimes lose the humanity of people. But at least with business, one of the things that sometimes it's harder in marriage or in like close relationships, there's kind of on some level, there's an expectation I'm going to learn something.
Yeah.
And so I think it's one of the reasons is we've connected like how team development and awareness of some of these fundamentals in a person, competence, their learning motivations, you know, their whether they're supported, feeling supported or not, the purpose of their work and the meaningfulness of the goals they're setting, and their performance, that when people start to talk using a structure, because we kind of, it's harder to do that without a structure, and most businesses at least were expected to learn something, then that's why I think we started to see people begin to trust each other. And the thing that I could not deny, Paul, over the years, these last couple of years especially, you start to realize how fundamental trust is. Like nothing happens. If you don't trust the email that I sent to get to my office today, you don't come to my office today. If you don't trust someone's not going to run into your car head on as you drove over here, you're not coming to my, you know, it's like this weird, and we trust in some of the irrational things. And then the layers of trust that we've also, because we created a trust index where a lot of this is at the individual level. Like I have to understand myself and share that with Paul in order to understand the personal level of trust. And then at the team level, we begin to share that together. And even at the leadership level, where you describe some of the things a leader might do to create meaning. And at the organizational level, there's systemic things that affect trust, like job descriptions, or, you know what I mean? Do I know where we're going? I can't create line of sight to a purpose that doesn't exist, right? Paul, thank you, for being a part of this, and we'll continue this conversation. All right, Sabbath.
Yeah, clearly there is more conversation to be had, and we will continue the conversation as we go. Paul, we want to make sure that the people listening know how they can connect with you. So tell us where they can find you and the best way to connect with your work is. I know you mentioned you're on sabbatical, so we don't want really for them to find you yet, but we want to protect your sabbatical. But yeah.
So I'm still online at Seattle Pacific. So yostp@spu.edu. You'll get an automatic reply that says, I'm checking my email from time to time, which is true. But you can reach me there.
Perfect. And we have one last wild question before we finish off with a final thought. Are you in a season of accepting yourself or changing yourself?
So I don't know. So as I went into the sabbatical, I've kept praying, what do I do during this time? And I haven't gotten any answers. So I just went through 20 years worth of journals that I've been keeping. 52 of them I went through. Wow. To see what captures me over the last 20 years. And there are a few little pieces here and there. I've probably kept 40 pages out of the last 20 years. But it really feels like God is saying, nah, I'm not going to tell you yet. So I am very much in a listening mode.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can say this, I say this with complete sincerity, and I always did. If you are a potential graduate student out there, and while he is still doing this work and serving this way, and you want to be stretched, and you want to be mentored by, and I know these minds, one of the greatest minds in some of the things that we've talked about in on-the-job development, someone who understands large corporations, smaller organizations, nonprofits, and understands developing people in leader capacity. I could not recommend you more. But I would say to work with Dr. Yost, and I think his students would say this, you also need to want that, you need to understand that necessity for stretch, for a little bit of person job misfit. If you are that person, man, I just would say go to apply to this program. So thanks, Paul.
Sure.
Building trust in your business starts with being able to measure it so that you can create a pathway for change. Our WiLD Trust Index measures the drivers of trust at the personal, team, and organizational level. Visit wildleaders.org/wild-trust-index to download a sample report and begin measuring trust. Seize your wild moment today.